Welcome and thank you for joining us today for Building a Foundation for NetSecOps Partnerships with Network Automation. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be moderating today's event. Our featured speakers are Seamus McGillicuddy, VP of Research covering Network Management at EMA, John Kavanagh, Chief Technology Officer at NetCraftsman, and Kelly Baig, Director of Market Strategy at Blue Planet. Seamus has more than 16 years of experience in the IT industry as an industry analyst and journalist. His research focuses on all aspects of managing enterprise networks. John leads a team of consultants focused on designing and delivering scalable, highly available, and secure infrastructure solutions. Before joining NetCraftsman, he held several positions, including Executive Director and Chief Architect for Global Network Services at JP Morgan Chase. Prior to joining Blue Planet, Kelly worked at HPE Aruba, where she was responsible for GTM strategies and execution for services, education, and NAS solutions. Prior to HPE, Kelly worked at a variety of technology companies that included EMC and Commvault. And before I hand things over to today's featured speakers, I wanted the audience to know that they will be concluding today's presentation by taking your questions. Feel free to log them anytime by using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded and you will receive a follow-up email from EMA that will include the on-demand playback as well as additional resources. So I hope you'll check that email out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our first featured speaker, Seamus McGillicuddy. Seamus?
Thanks, Raleigh, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. As Raleigh mentioned, I am the VP of Research for EMA, and I study all things network infrastructure and operations in the enterprise world. And one area of research that I've been focused on in the last couple of years is the interaction between network infrastructure and operations teams and cybersecurity, security operations, IT security, information security, whatever they're calling themselves. Is usually multiple security related groups under a CISO, but and also it's not easy. These groups do not always fit together naturally as partners on anything. So my research has looked at that very closely over the last couple of years. We also, as the focus of this event is, we've looked at how network automation technologies can be a good foundation for bringing those people together. And that's what my presentation is about. But first, collaboration between NetOps and SecOps, NetSecOps, as I started calling it back in 2018, I think. Our research has found that the collaboration between these groups is increasing. 75% of NetOps professionals that I surveyed recently told us that, that was as of a couple months ago, that they have observed growth in collaboration between those two groups, with about 30, here on the chart, 34% almost saying that it is significant. Only less than 10% say that there has been a decrease in these groups working together. The clear trend is that if you're a NetOps professional, if you're a network engineering person, you're trying to work with a security group more, or you're being told to. And the drivers of that collaboration, these are the 8 out of 10 organizations told us that this collaboration is happening in part because of the public cloud. Moving to the cloud has made partnerships between these groups more important. Hybrid work, whether it's working from home or working from anywhere, has made it important. Connectivity outside the office is less secure. Network teams are trying to work on remote solutions, remote access solutions that can scale to the demand they have now, and the security team is obviously going to have a hand in how they put together an architecture for that and implement it. And then data center modernization is another one, 8 out of 10. To a lesser extent, IoT and edge computing is driving these groups together. DevOps and WAN transformation, like using the internet more via the implementation of software-defined WAN or secure access service edge solutions. And zero trust security architectures is pretty common as well. Not as common as some of the ones at the top, but obviously you see these are all things that are transforming how digital enterprises work, and they're all things that are pushing these groups together. Um, in our research, we asked these people who are observing this increased collaboration, what are the benefits of doing it? And you see on the bottom right, network security architect at a $2.5 billion software company recently told me you get a final product that is more secure, better implemented, and can recover from disaster. Um, there's this effort to sort of um, improve both resiliency, performance, and security all at once. There's a recognition that when these two groups work together, both their goals are addressed. In terms of like, what are the benefits that they experience? Well, the majority of them told us that they can resolve security issues more quickly. And also they can reduce overall security risk. And then secondary benefits that large minorities of them are experiencing are operational efficiency, people just spending less time on things, whether that's like manual moves, adds, and changes, or implementing security policies. It's all easy to do. Also, faster resolution of user experience or network performance issues. You think about that and the faster resolution of security issues. Our research has often found that when a NetOps team is troubleshooting an issue that they perceive initially as an IT service problem, IT service degradation, or an outage, it can often reveal itself to be actually a security incident, a breach, or an attack. One of the obvious examples might be a DDoS attack, for instance, but also maybe just lateral movement is causing some sort of traffic issues inside your organization that's impacting performance, for instance. Those are when you can pinpoint it to performance or security as the root cause domain, you can solve those problems faster. And also, our research shows that network teams think they can get more influence over technical initiatives if they have security as a partner, and also just have more resilient networks. So those are opportunities. Also, these groups feel that when they're working together better, they serve other domains in the organization more effectively. Most often, IT service management, and if you have some sort of governance group inside IT or financial management group, those are also better served. But also cloud ops, data center operations, and DevOps are also frequent beneficiaries. But it's not easy. Only 39% of the people that we survey say that they've been fully successful at building and maintaining that sort of so-called NetSecOps partnership. And most of the enthusiasm is coming from IT executives, the people in the trenches who are like engineers, architects, administrators, analysts. They're much more pessimistic. So there's a disconnect. IT management, the CIO, the CISO, VPs of networking, they're like sending these dictums down to the trenches saying, work together, and they think that it's being done, but it's not necessarily being done. Like this network architect at a $15 billion retailer, he says that there's some cultural and skill gaps that are causing the issues. The security team's too esoteric. They ask, why is the application team putting this here instead of there when that ship's already sailed. There shouldn't be any philosophical discussions at that point when the application is in production. This person often said, we often have the sense that the security team doesn't understand what the business is. That can be a real barrier because the network team may feel like they're highly connected to the business, and the security team is not. That won't be the case in every enterprise, but that's this person's experience. And then this network security architect at a $2.5 billion software company told me that when the network team is building something and working on deadline, they see the security team as a roadblock to hitting a milestone, especially if leadership was pushing them to run things more tightly. And that tells you about the gap that we see between the IT executives and the people in the trenches. The CIO is telling them work together, but also get things done fast. And sometimes these groups get a little bogged down when they're trying to speak each other's languages and understand each other's priorities and get out of each other's way. So that can be an issue. In terms of like what is truly challenging them, one of the biggest things is data. Um, Data quality, data authority, like I have this data, you have that data, I want that data, no, you can't touch this data, that data does not agree with my data. Um, I only work with logs, but you have packets. I want the packets, but I don't know how to use the packets, which points to not just data problems, but the cross-team skills gap that is the number two issue. And then budget issues, architectural complexity, which is always an issue and all kinds of things, but here it is rearing its head as a secondary challenge. And then lack of tools and technologies that enable collaboration is another big secondary challenge, which actually points to network automation, which we'll talk about a little bit more. Here are the areas that these people want to collaborate on. Implementing technology, so provisioning and configuring new infrastructure, implementing new policy. That is the number one area that they're trying to work together. And then, the stage before that is a secondary issue like infrastructure planning design. So designing the network and designing policies. Maybe some of them are more reserved about that. The network team knows how they want the network to look. The security team knows what policy should look like. But some of them are working together on that. That's their secondary focus. And then even before that, a good number of them are trying to work together on technology evaluation and procurement. Researching things like zero trust network access and SASE, multi-cloud, working together on RFPs, sharing budgets. Network team often sees the security team as a conduit to money because the security team is listened to more by people who hold the purse strings. And this network team often sees them as a source of money, which can foster good partnerships. And if you're working together on evaluating and procuring technology, it can be a real benefit. And then secondary to tertiary priorities, operational monitoring, like monitoring for security and performance, managing alerts and escalating things. This is more important to organizations who told us that their collaboration was driven by work from home and zero trust in particular. Zero trust monitoring is a key piece of zero trust, so that makes sense. Work from home is a key a source of complexity for zero trust, so you can see why those two would be driving operational monitoring as a key area. And then change management is kind of a tertiary thing, moves, adds, and changes, network change approvals. This director of global network infrastructure and operations for an $80 billion technology company said change management was actually the most important thing for him. Their network team had trained security to look at certain things even before it came to the network team. So if someone requests a change to a routing table or firewalls, the first person that approves that change is the information security team before the network team has to even touch it. So that's an interesting arrangement in that organization. So how does network automation enable NetSecOps? Well, we see it as a potential foundation of it. We asked people in our research on this collaboration, what's the importance of network automation tools to facilitating collaboration between these two groups? And you see nearly 91% believe it's important, with almost 45% saying it is very important. The most successful collaborators the most successful NetSecOps collaborators in our research were more likely to rate network automation as essential. And this director of NetOps and engineering at a $7 billion hospital chain said automation gives his group consistent configs, consistent controls, easy rollouts of change, but it also allows, from a data collection standpoint, to get better insight into what's going on in the network. And that consistency reduces security risk. Like, you have a better source of truth about your network. You have a better understanding what the intent is, when you have an automation solution that shows you how your network is meant to operate, and you can compare that to your assurance capabilities and your tool set to compare state to network intent. So modern network automation solutions offer that shared source of truth. 74% of organizations want automation platforms that gather and store data in a network source of truth. It's hard to have one source of truth. I think often it's like a federated system. You have multiple sources of truth that are integrated into maybe an automation pipeline that assures that you have all of your intent and state federated in a meaningful way. But a network source of truth for a network automation solution might include like golden configs, but also like config information that's been deployed to devices, DDI data, so like IP address space and DNS, and then security policies. And when NetOps and SecOps are working together, they can use that source of truth to enforce policy and compliance. I'm sorry, enforce security and compliance policies during moves, adds, and changes. Like, you cannot make this change because it violates our security policy. Being able to like point that out in an automation tool, is a lifesaver, because so many times like people are making configurations by hand, make configuration changes by hand that violate security policies, that introduce vulnerabilities. If you have an automation solution that can analyze change, can restrict manual change, or correct manual change, detect unauthorized change, all the better. Which gets to like the ability to audit the network for security policies, for routing policies, for QoS, anything. It can also help you troubleshoot performance and investigate security incidents, because you should have like a lot of the data, and that tells you like what's normal and what isn't, what's allowed and what isn't, what violates policy and what isn't. We find that when enterprises like try to manually build a source of truth, that when they are relying on, for instance, hunting for data, when they want to make an automated change, like there's a lot of companies who don't have, a lot of organizations that don't have the data, like their config, the golden configs and their DDI information and all the data that's needed to make a change ready at hand in some sort of source of truth that can simplify the process of pushing it, of preparing and pushing a change. When they are relying on engineers going to like a spreadsheet for IP address information, for instance, or going to some siloed source of information on what the config should be, it leads to operational inefficiency. Most of all, it takes way too long to implement a change or to revert a change that's bad. And secondarily, they don't have visibility into changes, sufficient visibility in changes. Security vulnerabilities are introduced, especially if like the data that, let's say they're trying to cut and paste data from a siloed resource into their automation solution, and they just make a mistake and they are missing a couple pieces of information in the cut and paste. You think about like how many times have you cut and paste a phone number and you've missed the first number on the zip code, for instance, and then you push that equivalent into like a change in your network, and suddenly there's a vulnerability, or the switch just goes down because it doesn't, it's suddenly unreachable or whatever. Another one is just performance degradation. Not just the security vulnerabilities, but as I mentioned, the switch might go down. It might start uh, forwarding traffic to the wrong place. And just, the network just isn't performing up to its standards. In our research, we asked these people that are trying to better partner, partner up. How do you want to use automation to improve the way you work together? And majorities of them said event management and infrastructure provisioning. So detecting faults, breaches, knowing how to escalate things to the right person, this security analyst, this network engineer. And on the infrastructure provisioning side, that one was favored more by people who are the most successful with NetSecOps collaboration. So being better at automating the provisioning of a new switch, or getting a new, let's say you're upgraded a firewall, the network team and the security team needs to work in that firewall to get it up and running for different reasons. Automation can facilitate that. And then the secondary things are, incident response, which is actually a higher priority for people who work in a security group, and infrastructure lifecycle management, making sure everything's patched and up to date. And then network design, those are the big ones. 74% of the companies in our research said that they also see an opportunity where if network teams and security teams are, have a good foundation for collaboration with network automation, they can turn around and make that automated environment an enabler of self-service to other groups like DevOps, Cloud Ops, data center operations. So those groups can access like a catalog of networking and security services through that automation. Here's the policy you need for that kind of application. If you're going to talk to this database, it should have this policy. If you're going to have this many workloads, you need to do this to your load balancers, things like that. We also asked them what kinds of automation tools are relevant to your collaboration. And almost half said network change and configuration management tools, very well-established network automation solutions, but also security policy automation. And that was actually one favored by more successful collaborators. And then secondarily, a lot of them were interested in infrastructure as a code solutions like Ansible, and DDI automation, like those DNS, DHCP, and IPAM vendors, which was actually something favored more by security teams, which is interesting because it's usually owned by the network team. We asked them some questions about what do they need from the network automation tools that they're using for this, and you see platform requirements like ease of deployment and administration is very important. Third-party integrations, can this integrate with IT service management? Can it integrate with security monitoring, network monitoring tools? And then ease of use and scalability. Ease of use, very important when organizations with teams with skills gaps are trying to collaborate. And then in terms of feature requirements, they want device lifecycle management, security policy design, implementation audit, change analysis and modeling. Those are the big ones. Config compliance monitoring is very important. And 89% said they want some integrated network assurance capabilities, the ability to integrate monitoring and troubleshooting tools and maybe incident management tools into an automation solution. Successful users of network automation are more likely to rate that as very important. Top use cases in those integrated network assurance capabilities, they said, were monitoring security and compliance risk, measuring application performance and health, and monitoring network device health. Those are all sought by the majorities of the organizations that we survey. And then AI should be a piece of this, AI and machine learning. You see here, 83% of people we surveyed believe that intelligent network automation can improve collaboration between the network team and the security team. You know, how many companies, how companies use this. It's about security and compliance insights, automated network problem remediation, proactive security protection, and improved quality of the network source of truth. Like they think that they can improve the quality of the data, the federation of data that they maintain on their source of truth for the network. So that's a key component that you should look for in network automation in general, but also to enable NetSecOps collaboration. So final thoughts, digital disruptions are forcing these groups to work together, especially cloud. That one's always there, hybrid work. And these partnerships are hard to establish. As most people are probably well aware, it's different languages, different priorities, different skills. Enterprises believe that network automation can enable and encourage this collaboration. And we at EMA, we think that that automation should establish or enable a network source of truth. Should meet the requirements of both teams as much as possible. And it should leverage AI and machine learning technology to provide meaningful insights on the data, but also to provide some intelligent automation that goes beyond what network automation tools from 10 or 20 years ago could do. So with that, I am going to turn it over to John to pick up his part of this presentation.
Thanks, Seamus. Excuse me. Want to talk about the actual execution side of doing automation and orchestration. NetCraftsman is a professional services company, and we specialize in actually doing automation for clients. So we have a lot of experience in this area that Seamus has been describing. And from an enterprise background, it's kind of interesting to think about how enterprises operate relative to service providers, where a lot of things are automated, particularly due to the scale that they have to operate at. So most enterprises are structured around siloed functional towers. You have an application team, database team, server and cloud infrastructure teams, network security operations, all separated. Each of these works independent of each other, and we've seen with plenty of clients situations where somebody designs a network to meet an application requirement, throws it over the wall, and then security has to pick up the pieces and turn around and figure out how to actually secure the environment. Service providers, on the other hand, because of their business model, wind up structuring their environment around service delivery. You think about this, they're designing new services, and they're specifically looking at services that can be deployed at scale. I did a couple of years, when I was at Cisco working with a service provider organization. And at the beginning of the episode, we were having some service delivery issues that had to be worked out. And we had, at the time, about 4,000 deployed CPE devices in that environment for the client. 2 years later, as we were learning how to deploy this environment, and just to understand, it was a very early version of MPLS when it was coming out in around the year 2000. And by the time we finished our project with them, they had already deployed 45,000 CPEs and were accelerating that process because they had over 100,000 X25 based technology, CPE devices deployed in their environment for clients, and we're moving towards, an all MPLS background. And you can see that in that process, it can't be done manually, and it can't be done sequentially, as we see with the enterprise use case. And in service providers, because they look at things this way, they take months to years to decide to roll something new out. So the decision to move to MPLS was not taken lightly. and it was a major change in their architecture. So actually getting it right was really important to them. But today we're seeing agile service delivery, in the service provider world, where they're actually driving down, from months to years to weeks to months to deploy, new technologies and new environments. So the automation becomes even more important to them. The issue you see on the left, the enterprises are doing this piecemeal, and that's, problematic. So the automation use case is about scale from the standpoint of the service provider. On the enterprise side, it's about delivery of new services, and the results that they get are often, relatively poor. There's a good use case we have where when you think about how that environment works, we're in a situation where an end user from, you know, a deployment standpoint wants to be able to deploy and develop new applications. And so the applications team is looking to have a very dynamic development environment ready for them. But if they go in and they actually do that kind of automation to improve their side, there's a lot of other work that has to be done. You think about security rules that have to be deployed, in the firewalls, segmentation strategies that meet that environment from the network, or load balancer rules that have to be deployed. All of that comes into play. But now, in the last 10 years, we've seen a huge emergence of something called network feature virtualization or function virtualization, where we have moved in the service provider world towards general purpose CP devices. I guess the best analogy in a lot of enterprises today would be, service, software-defined networking, technologies like SD-WAN. And when we look at that in detail, that NFV concept, it means making the network and security more flexible and simpler by minimizing the dependence on different kinds of hardware. Okay, and so when we're looking in this, we're creating a virtual machine environment where you can deploy different kinds of devices in different kinds of environments. So, DLP engines, firewalls, you name it, can be deployed as part of an orchestration process. So there's a concept called service chaining, which comes in here, where you're actually applying multiple things at the same time. If you have to deploy 1,000 new clients in a month, or 1,000 new sites for existing clients in a month, you don't want to scale up teams to be able to deal with this sequentially and have different teams deal with different appliances in this environment. And so what the automation world is trying to do in a lot of ways is try to bring this into the enterprise. So most enterprises are in the situation where, no one group is responsible for the full end-to-end picture. That probably rests at the top at like a CIO level who doesn't have a lot of technical knowledge relative to what happens in the trenches. So, that process of designing something, throwing it over the wall, having it implemented, and then bringing in, an application suite, and doing stuff becomes, a real chore moving it along. So a good failure case scenario that we ran into was a virtualization team at a Fortune 500 created a portal for those development folks. They could sit down on a GUI, enter a few keystrokes, and put together, an environment that might have 100 VMs in it. And this automated the workflows necessary to go through that virtualization team. And it reduced their workload dramatically. But what they did is they actually wound up for other teams and other towers generating, believe it or not, just emails into ServiceNow type ticket structures. And so they were going in and getting a notification that a particular VM on a particular IP address needed to be permitted on firewalls. And so this started happening at scale and created backlogs of work for some of the other organizations. And after a while, there were lots of orphaned load balance and firewall rules. When we were brought in to take a look at this, it was shown to us that on Monday morning quarterbacking calls from an operations standpoint, there were lots of applications not working because they had run into a situation relative to hitting a firewall rule they didn't know existed. But they hadn't realized that they had a different problem, and that different problem was really serious, and that was that there were probably orphan firewall rules around that were permissive in nature that would allow people to reach production workloads that they weren't supposed to. This, really shocked them, and it took a while to get into the process of going through and looking at this. There's a great book on this that was written for the DevOps environment called the Phoenix Project, and you can look it up on Amazon. But it's a novel about IT and DevOps, and it's presented in a really interesting methodology and very, very readable. You can probably read it in 1 or 2 sittings, and it gets into this issue about what happened here, which is we optimized one piece of a service delivery chain, not the entire end-to-end component. And this gets into a real issue of they actually didn't move the needle at all. They just simply moved who had the ball. So now suddenly the network and security teams were overworked, and then they created a unique problem as a result of that. Was that they were churning through a lot of VMs very quickly, being very responsive to their clients, but creating lots of work for other towers. And that's one of the problems we really try to take a look at is if you're doing automation right, you're going to think about the concept of service chaining and about doing an end-to-end picture, which includes keeping the state associated with stuff. So what they had failed to do is understand that when they got rid of a VM, that they needed to actually hang on to some of the information, which is what firewall rules did they ask for? What firewall, and load balancer rules and other kinds of components that were being handed to these other teams. Who turns that off? And the fact is nobody did, and that creates the problem. And Gartner's done a number of studies, that we've looked at that show that CMDB accuracy is very low in a lot of environments. And this is, in particular, a case where, these towers working together would be very important. So the use case for this is when you think about service providers and cloud service providers, they've all chosen the NFV route. It fits their model, simple end orchestration, but they're simple and repeatable services. On the enterprise side, on the other hand, they're not really sold often on the NFV white box model, but they did adopt SDN and cloud. Services are very complex, and what we discover is, in reality, you have a hybrid of on-prem, SaaS, and cloud components that work in this environment. And this really requires an orchestration system that can track the end-to-end flows across the IT towers with NFV-like precision, like we have in that service provider, manufacturing type case. So the call to action in enterprises is to start thinking about this from an end-to-end standpoint. Forrester, in a 2021 paper on zero trust network access, stated that you should merge security and networking or sunset your business. They were really that, I guess, provocative in the statement because they wanted to get people to think about this and about the issues that come from not thinking end to end. And they were specifically attacking that tower-based approach that, where we deliver services that way. And that problem happens because the majority of current ITSM and network management systems do not have a single source of truth. And as I mentioned, Gartner, has produced a number of studies that show that CMDBs are rarely complete. And this becomes problematic because you have to know the full system. And this leads the community looking for new approaches to do with this. So solving this issue requires a system being delivered as code. And you'll hear people talk about, network as code. One of the cool things about that concept, however, is that it can also be done for documentation as code. So you can self-document environments that are built this way. Or for organizations that don't have the wherewithal to launch systems at this scale, well, there are consulting firms like mine, but there's also the need for some kind of an ITSM environment that can do this and provide that end-to-end orchestration. And at this point, I'm going to be turning it over to Kelly.
Thank you. All right. Great discussion there from John. Really appreciate also the research and the insights that Seamus, you provided. I'm here to talk about Blue Planet's view and what we see happening with our customers, and really talking about the impact of network automation and how that plays in here. Again, just extending the narrative you've already been hearing about. I want to begin with just who is Blue Planet, right? So Blue Planet is a division of Ciena, and hopefully you've heard of Ciena. Many times we find Blue Planet is a better kept secret. So just be aware, it's a software part of Ciena where we deliver intelligent network automation solutions to enterprise and also to CSP telco types of environments. And it's really because of the telco roots and the communication service provider roots of this software that we know it's proven and scalable for network automation. And we're very pleased now that we've introduced this for enterprises of all sizes and made these kinds of capabilities really better available in the market. So how we see our customers evolving is on the left to the right of this picture. And very much as John was describing, these environments have become a lot more complicated as organizations have introduced and adopted virtualized approaches to network devices. And why this has happened, what's kind of spurring this, it turns out this was already happening, but what has accelerated the impact of this are some of these trends that you see here in blue. First, the work from home that occurred, primarily from COVID impacts and people going home to work. How do you manage their connectivity in to your environment? Turns out becomes a little bit easier. You have to start to migrate into these virtual platforms to make that possible. The migration to cloud and the need to virtualize in advance of that cloud adoption and to enable that to work better starts to be, part of the picture. And what comes along with this as well is this need for security teams and network teams to work more closely together, because securing, the applications and data through the network turns out to be a lot more complex when you are accommodating work from home and the cloud migration. And here you can just see the picture of how, with the virtual network functions that John was describing, you have more options, but you also have more complexity. And how do you manage those connections? How do you make sure nobody who shouldn't be accessing the data and the apps is actually getting into your network? And looking at also merger and acquisition, IoT at the edge, the need to be compliant with policies in the company, and how do you enforce those through your network with automation, enabling that cloud and work from home as well, right? So these are some of the trends, and these are happening with the Blue Planet customer environment. So why does network automation help to address this? I think we've heard a lot from Seamus on this. Blue Planet also sees this. Networks are critical, but very complex infrastructures with a lot of moving parts and pieces, different brands, different types, and automation just helps to sort through what actually matters and how you can make it work better. And of course, networks are central to most organizations. In fact, customer and employee satisfaction depends on the ability to connect to the network and, reliably get your work done, or to serve your customer, or to have your partner ecosystem working well as well. An incomplete view of the network impacts both performance and security. So you're going to see a higher risk of security breaches and data going to places it shouldn't go if, in fact, you don't have a view of that network and, in fact, automation control to enforce those compliance policies into that network. And finally, also, we talk about automation as key to putting less pressure on your IT operations, because your teams are very busy. You need more time to do the variety of tasks that are required. Automation can take the pressure off by doing the routine tasks, the repetitive tasks, and not forcing a person to have to waste their effort to do something that in fact automation can handle very well. So, kind of how we approach network automation and what makes us more unique. Of course, first of all, it's our legacy of where we come from, having proven capabilities from the world's largest types of networks and most demanding service levels, and now bringing those to the enterprise to enable enterprise operations as well. And if we look at, the top platform requirements and the top feature requirements that Seamus talked about as emerging in the studies that he's done, we can see here that these are consistent with what network automation from Blue Planet has to offer. So, for the enterprise, the ease of deployment and administration of that platform approach turns out to be very important. We do that through a SaaS model, which is hosted in the cloud with an agent-free type of way of collecting the data from the individual network environments, making that all available through role-based access in a portal. So, it's a very fast to deploy, very easy setup, and it just makes it, over time, agile with feature enhancements that are delivered by Blue Planet to our customers. We have third-party integrations also out of the box. So as organizations are setting up and using the Blue Planet automation approach, we are providing that integration with ServiceNow, with Okta, with Opsgenie, whatever, Slack, Teams, the normal types of operating environment that is also needed to operate around the network are all integrated already into the software. So it just makes it very easy for ticket tracking or for notification when alerts are, indicating something's gone wrong, that needs some attention. It's just nice to have all of that easily, working, without a lot of effort when you start with your network automation. Ease of use, making sure that the functionalities are intuitive, easily moved around on the screen so you can see what you need, you can drill down when you need to, and again, so you're alerted, so you don't have to be looking at the screen all of the time. Also, so there's closed loop remediation, enabling configurations to be reset, and then you can be notified of that, but you don't have to wait to know that you're adhering to your compliance policies in that network. Scalability is so key here and can't be underestimated. Again, because we come from telco types of environments, we can start small but grow large and know you're going to get the kind of performance and visibility and control that you need, no matter how large your network is or how widespread or how many thousands of devices it may include. In terms of feature requirements, our approach is a life cycle end-to-end for that network management that you've heard about, right? So we start with inventory automation, and we go through configuration and software version control. We have a slide coming that will actually show you those pieces, but it's really an end-to-end approach that combines all of the capabilities you need in one, integrated portfolio approach. We also understand the relationship between making sure you have a secure approach around your network and enabling your network team to partner with your security team to provide that visibility and to take action when needed, when things go wrong or when policies change and you need to implement policies into your network. Change analysis and modeling with what if scenarios on what will happen to performance if these kinds of changes are made. We provide in our portfolio. Configuration compliance monitoring is a closed looped approach, as I mentioned, and something we're very proud of as a capability set we find more unique in the market. And of course, change management and the ability to manage the software into the network devices along with the configuration of those devices. So this is just some of the capabilities and how they align with what Seamus was describing. And here you see our approach, from end to end in terms of the life cycle. Again, starting with visibility of what's in that network. So you know how to manage what you have, you got to see it. Configuration and software control both together with backup, with restore, with rollback to multiple points in time. An ML-based anomaly detection approach, again, proven in the largest types of environments with thresholds that you can set and which are baselined based on normal performance in your network. And if you go out of range, the ability to see that, respond to that, alert you. So kind of learning that network and what's the norm and, when you go outside that norm. Fault and performance monitoring, of course, being very important and built in, and that continuous adherence with compliance to your policies. Again, all offered on a SaaS delivery model with pay-as-you-grow billing and that agile feature maintenance over time. We were also very proud to note that we were recognized by GigaOM in a recent radar report from them on NetDevOps that we are a leader and fast mover for these kinds of capabilities in the enterprise. And then finally, just some closing thoughts here from Blue Planet's view, in terms of enabling NOC and SOC teams to collaborate. Network automation is a core component to this. And we would say, and kind of how our clients and customers talk with us is it is a journey. We are prepared to start, kind of where you're at, but also expand over time according to where you need to go next. And I think that's a good approach. I think a lot of teams are overwhelmed with the notion that, well, network automation is a topic. How do we break that down? Where do we get started? We talk a lot about starting with inventory automation, just knowing what is that network source of truth? What do you have in the network is a great way to begin the conversation and begin the planning process. Some of the what if capabilities that we also talk about are part of that as well. We also want to see more integration. Just start with a conversation between the SOC and the NOC teams. Begin there, just have some planning discussions where you talk about here's what's happening for the next 12 months in the network. Here are the plans. What are the considerations? What are the concerns coming from the security team? Just beginning that conversation should reveal places where new kinds of automation might be useful or new kinds of reporting or new kinds of control around the network. We also, some of the benefit with network automation is talking about reducing the mean time to knowledge. It's really knowing, kind of what is the root cause problem, therefore how to remediate it effectively. There's so much happening in networks. It's really hard without automation and without AI ops monitoring specifically to filter intelligently and bring your attention where it's needed the most. So we definitely agree with Seamus that, the AI ops ML-based capabilities are critical there. And we want, to always remind, of course, in a networking environment, it's the ecosystem. It's everything that has to work together. And it's not just networks, it's, all the other surrounding technologies. So having that bigger, broader understanding and view is critical as well. Okay, so I want to stop here and say thank you and then turn this over to Raleigh for our question and answer portion of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, John and Seamus, for those great insights. Before I jump into questions, I wanted to remind the audience you will be receiving a follow-up email, including this resource, so I encourage you to check that email out. Now, let's go ahead and jump into the questions, starting with you, Seamus. The first question is, our organization would benefit from better network automation, but we have a limited budget. Can you say more about how the collaboration between NOC and SOC teams can help with that problem?
There are a couple different options. Maybe you could pool your development resources in case you want to try to build your own automation, because we do find a mix. Like a lot of enterprises are both buying commercial software off the shelf, like from a company like Blue Planet, but they're also developing their own stuff. So maybe you might want to develop your own software for specific use cases if you got the internal resources for that and you don't have the budget. Another thing is, if you're looking at it from the perspective of the network team, the security team is always a good partner to have for winning budget. And I remember one network engineer telling me that he viewed the security group as the 800-pound gorilla in the CIO's office, saying we need to buy this to protect us from that. And I think network automation as a foundation for NetSecOps collaboration is a good pitch to your security people, saying, hey, we think that if we implement this automation solution, our two groups are going to work together better. We'll be able to impose more compliance controls that you can set for us and we can enforce through this tool. And the security group is going to say, okay, either I have the budget right now and I'm going to pool it with yours to enable that procurement, or I'm going to go, our director is going to go up the chain and argue for more budget. I think that's time and again in my one-on-one conversations with enterprises, that comes up as the security group has the ability to get money. So keep that in mind if you're having budget issues.
Thank you, Seamus. Jumping over to you, John. Speaking of collaboration, as a solution category that helps NOC and SOC teams to collaborate, are you seeing that organizations are planning to work with existing network automation tools, or that they need something new that is more designed for the needs of both NOC and SOC teams?
Well, a little bit of both. There are people coming out with lots of tools, and I'm always, looking at, third-party tools and new things that are coming out. But if you look at the major players in this space, for people who want to operate, their own tool base, you're looking at like Ansible and Terraform, creating, those kind of environments. And so, that's certainly the way to do it if you want to manage and run your own automation yourself. For the mid-sized firms, I tend to look at something more like Blue Planet, and systems in that class, because do they have the wherewithal to run automation, but can they maintain it? Because this changes. We just did an end-to-end service deployment, using Ansible for a banking client. And, it's a pretty complex environment. And one of the real learnings I've had from it over the last 6 months is that I can teach, like network and security engineers to use automation. But just like there's a difference between a network architect and a network engineer, to create the automation, it's more of an architectural engagement where somebody has to really be able to, in their heads, visualize the environment to do to create that end-to-end vision. And not everybody can afford that kind of, individual, and so there is, in my opinion, looking at systems, for example, Blue Planet that we're discussing here, gives you the capability of being able to do that, that service chaining, like appropriately, because this all has to work together.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Kelly, let's wrap up with you. How are Blue Planet's customers starting the process of network automation? What have you seen?
Yeah, it's a great question. And also, I want to point out it is the network automation capability set, but it's also the services that can go with that through managed service providers like NetCraftsman, right? So what we see is we're working hand in glove with MSPs to serve the enterprise customers. And there are a variety of services that organizations like NetCraftsman have been able to add with network automation to make it work better. So you're talking, John, about Ansible playbook creation, for example, which helps automate. And then there's the need to then manage that over time. So we see that coming back in with something like Blue Planet as a repository for that management. A lot of these organizations really are starting from just trying to understand what they have in their network. So a network assessment service from a managed service provider like NetCraftsman is a great starting point because it gives you visibility to where your network is working well. It gives you visibility to maybe where you've got older components that are introducing unnecessary security risk, maybe where you have things like firewall rules that John described that you've lost track of that are also causing, kind of problems out there. And even network devices you've lost track of entirely, which again become security exposures because you're not managing them, because you're not aware of them. So just starting with an assessment is a great place to begin to understand where you should put your focus and then manage that forward and plan for automation and new network type capabilities in your environment.
Great. Thank you all for answering those questions. And I wanted to thank our audience for joining us today. I hope we'll see you at a future EMA research webinar. Thanks again for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.